I'm really excited to be here and to speak about basically two of my favorite topics that in my mind are one. And what I want to present to you is creativity is spirituality. And before I go into that, just to introduce myself, my name's Carol May Whittick. I'm a creativity and spiritual life coach. I'm also a podcaster, public speaker, and author. And my talking about creativity is something that I really discovered maybe by accident or maybe by design because it turns out to be my work. But I recognized the connection between spirituality and creativity very early in my life as a little girl. And usually, when I speak to people, and especially when I'm speaking to new clients or people who want to work with me or just discuss creativity with me, their first pushback is always going to be, well, I'm not a creative person, I don't sing or do music or anything like that. And the thing about creativity, it isn't just about using creativity in the arts. All of us, every single one of us in this world today are creative beings. That's why we're here. If you think about when people say, okay, when I want to go out in the world, I want to make a mark on the world, I want to make an impression on the world. If that isn't an evidence or language that people use when it comes to when we think about art, I don't know what is. So if I was to say, what is the difference between the way that artists use creativity and everyone else who would say, oh, I'm not a creative person? Well, creative people who utilize the arts as their expression have worked out a way of being very disciplined and very conscious and very intentional with their creativity. And they've worked out a way to use an art form as their expression. But we're all doing that. Wherever you go, you're leaving a mark, you're leaving an expression of yourself, and that is indeed creativity, because then people will be able to say, oh, Carol was here, or she was here, or he was here, because there's something that's left as an imprint of yourself within other people. What we want to do ideally is to create something that leaves a lasting and also a positive expression and also an inspiring expression, an impression on people who we meet throughout our lives. And if we think about some words as well when it comes to creativity, and I'm going to go back to artists as well, because there's some words that we use that will kind of balance very much with what you would use words when you're talking about spirituality. So some of the words that I was using is an artist. When you're utilizing your creativity for art, you're very intentional with that, you're very conscious of that, you're very disciplined with that, you practice that, and then you become very clear about who you are, and then you expand on those things. And if we think about what people think about when it comes to spiritual practices, those words are used within spiritual practices anyway. We practice our spiritual practices, whether we're meditating or praying or contemplating, whatever you use within your spiritual practice is the very same kind of focus and concentration that you would use if you're bringing it to your spiritual practice. And also another thing as well, and what came to me when I was young was when I used to sit and write and create, and I was writing and I was playing the piano and I was singing and I was making clothes and cooking and everything, but nobody showed me how to do any of these things, especially nobody in my house taught me how to write songs. This is something that came to me really initially when I was figuring out how to write songs. I didn't realize that I could write them because I was learning the piano. I would go to the shop and buy a book that my piano teacher would tell me to buy, and then come back and we'd go through the book, and then I'd know the tune. So initially I thought that that's where music came from, the shop in books. But then after a while, when I had a little bit of language in terms of I knew my way around the piano a little bit, that then I could come up with ideas and play around and find new things from that. So it was like, okay, so where is this coming from? This isn't coming from the shop, it isn't coming from the book. My piano teacher hasn't told me these things? What is it that I'm connecting to that is giving me all of these ideas, that is giving me this direction? And even though I couldn't necessarily say that it was spirituality that I was aware of, but I knew it was coming from something that was a non-physical part of myself, somewhere that I couldn't really put my finger on, but it was very, very real. And it would enter my mind or my awareness at the most inopportune times, really. It would be when I'd be the most relaxed, the most receptive, and then I would be able to then turn that into something else and turn that into something real. And I realized that I had a magic within me, and I was in awe of the fact that I had this magic, and I had somewhere that I could lean into and somewhere that I could tap into and communicate with. And for me, that creativity was also a real lifesaver, because my home life was to not to go into too much detail, but it was chaotic, and there was a lot of instability that was happening around me. And having that space to go to that nobody else was able to touch, nobody else was able to influence, and I could go there, and it was just this mine of, and this abundance of ideas and experiences, and I felt really held and really directed by going to that place. And over times, as I got older and had more of an interest and a curiosity in things that were not just about religion. So I came from a very church and religious background, and I still have that belief in God, but my expansion on that was outside of it just being coming from the church. And over the years, I've meandered in and out of many different types of modalities and brought from all of them what has worked for me. And what has worked for me is the things that have always maintained something that is similar. And then, of course, within any kind of group, wherever you've got humans, you're going to always get some sort of deviation and some corruption. But there was always something that was very pure and very much about going back and finding that soul part of yourself. And again, it always came back to these words that were discipline, consciousness, intention, practice. And these are the things that we use when it comes to our creativity. We're disciplined, we're intentional about what we're using them for. And by finding that magic, by finding that confidence within that myself, that really kept me focused on aiming for something within my life, even when the external world was pulling me left and right, and a lot of it was very upsetting, and it took a lot of times for me to kind of get back on track. But I always had a track to go back onto, and my goal was to continue to write songs, continue to perform, continue to do music. And that creativity, that going back to something and going to that space where all of these ideas were constantly flooding, and all of these knowings, sometimes without it making sense that I knew these things, were coming through me when I relied on that space that I was using for my creativity. But it was opening so much more guidance for me that then I was able to bring forward into the world as well. And having that connection with my soul for me was also having that deep and personal conversation with God. You know, I'm not afraid to use the word God. I know it's a bit of a trigger word for many people now, but ultimately that's the source that I rely on to this day. And by knowing that you are held by something that just wants the best for you and wants to feed and expand you in the way that you express yourself, to me is no better. There's no better thing, there's no more exciting thing than that. And I believe as well, why do I believe that creativity is important, and why creativity is important for us each to discover in our own way? First, I see that there's a lot of people who are suffering from, in particular, anxiety. And when anxiety would enter my life is when I'd lost that connection and that belief in myself. Anxiety to me was when I was relying on external things or trying to figure out how to change the external world to my liking. And that would usually depend on other people's opinions and other people's feedback on who I was and what I should do. But when I went into my intention, when I went into my discipline, when I went into my creativity, that was solid, that and that was never changed. And in that space, I was always a winner. I was always the best that I could be. It was only when I put it out into the world and listened back to other people and started to move to whatever they wanted me to move to that I went off center. So I believe that when we're able to find that core within ourselves, when we're able to find what it is that is our creativity, our own expression, our own authentic expression, then we become sovereign and powerful human beings within the world. And as well as taking away from, being able to reduce your anxiety in this world, I think there's also another really important reason why each individual should endeavor to tap into their own creativity and find what that means for themselves. We're moving so fast in this world where we are integrating alongside and integrating with technology. And I'm not a technology hater. I'm not against AI or any of those things, but I think it's very easy for us to potentially just rely on these things and lose the connection that we have with that part of ourselves that is linked to our soul and our spirit and our creativity. And so the technology that we have and the technology that's coming in, if we're able to know what our voice sounds like, then we're able to know what our truth is and what our intention is and what our intuition sounds like to ourselves, so that we can then be able to discern when we're using advanced technologies, or when we're hearing anything in the world, what resonates with us or doesn't. The only reason we get, I believe, pulled off center is when someone says something about ourselves and we're hearing a little bit of what we might agree with, whether it's something positive or whether it's something negative. So by moving into this advanced technological age that we have, I endeavor to invite and encourage people to find their own creativity, because by finding that, it opens you up to finding the magic within yourself, how you have that own individual magic, and also to really find what your spirituality is, what it looks like for you, that connection with your soul and with your voice, so that you can be in this world and see what happens, but also know that you are a sovereign being within this world, because the world will have you believe that you're all the other things, which you're not. And the more that I'm able to have that gateway to my soul and that creativity, I'm able to recognize other people from a soul level, because this world wants to slice and dice us and divide us in so many ways. And I find it almost impossible now to judge people solely on their external or their whatever category they put themselves in, because the more that I know myself from my soul, that I know that I want to be able to connect with other people's soul, because it's a deep and it's a true relationship. And I also feel that as we're able to move forward with these advanced technological tools, that we can create something really new in the world. I'm by no means an expert, but I am an excited participant and user of these things, but I want to see how they can fuel with me and move forward. And I work with people who, and women in particular over 40, to really work with their intuition, to really discover and rediscover their creativity, which never leaves them, and also to be able to look at their lives and see that they've already got all of the experiences that they've been through are relevant to what they create in this world. And each of us individually has the opportunity to leave our mark, to make an impression on the world, which is true creativity.